If you play horror games, you know Resident Evil. Hell, even people who haven't played a single horror game know that franchise. Not many people know that Resident Evil wouldn't be a thing without this game on the Famicom known as Sweet Home. There has been so many videos on the subject that I feel like many people may have even talked about it a lot better. Even I made a bit of an attempt early in my YouTube career. Hell, the game made such an impact on me that I even have the original logo tattooed to the top of my foot. I feel like I've mentioned random tattoos quite a bit in these videos. Released in 1989 as a movie tie-in game, I don't think anyone at the time would have thought the legacy that this game made, and how it can still be felt in the indie game scene. One of the games I'm looking forward to the most right now is Echoes of the Living by Moonglint. Seems to be very much inspired by Resident Evil, so that Sweet Home heritage lives on. I may be getting a little bit ahead of myself, so let's actually talk about that heritage a little bit. Like I said before, the game is actually a movie tie-in. One that I actually sat through and it was something. Though it is based on the film, the director of that game, Takuro Fujiwara, was told that it didn't have to match the movie beat per beat. He was able to go on set of the film in order to make sure he was able to get a similar vibe in his game. The director and producer of the film were even the producer and supervisor for the game, so even if it wasn't one for one, it managed to a close enough feel to it. The game played a lot different than many modern gamers would have expected. First off, you control 5 different characters and it plays very much like an old school RPG complete with random encounters. Each of the characters has some sort of special ability or item that is useful in the overworld or in battle. If a character dies, they die for good. That's right, in this game, there's permadeath. There was no bringing them back, and it was only after all 5 died that you would get an official game over. But I would imagine that'd be very hard with some characters gone. I've actually never beaten the game with all 5 characters. Critics at the time seemed to be mostly positive on the game. Famitsu gave it their Critics' Choice Award, and apparently reviews preferred the game over the film. Now, there was a bit of an issue because it wasn't brought over to the United States. First off, the movie wasn't being brought over, so a tie-in to a movie seemed like a bit of a stretch. Also, the rise in popularity of the RPG hadn't happened over here yet, so that was 2 strikes against the game. And the final strike is that it was most likely the fact the game was very dark and gruesome. The US division of Nintendo most likely wasn't interested in localizing a game with no cultural context, an unpopular genre, and something bloody on a family-friendly system. There are 2 types of gameplay in this, like most standard JRPGs. There's an overworld that is the mansion where you're moving around trying to find the frescoes that the team is trying to recover and solve some basic puzzles while trying to juggle items between characters. The other style of gameplay is the turn-based combat experience that can be rather brutal at times. Each of those 5 characters have something unique about them in order to help deal with the mansion or the frescoes. I am really going to struggle with these names. You're gonna just have to forgive me on this one. Kazuo Hoshino has a lighter, as lame as that sounds, that can be used in both combat and dealing with ropes while exploring the mansion. It also seems like he can take the most beating as he is the highest HP. Ryo Taguchi uses his camera to document the frescoes, and it can also be used to decode messages and inflict damage on certain kinds of enemies. Akiko Hayawaka is the team healer, which is fairly self-explanatory. Asuka uses a vacuum, in case you thought the lighter was lame sounding. It is used to clean the frescoes and get rid of broken glass around the mansion. Lastly, we have Emi Hoshino, who can unlock things in the overworld and is the strongest of the female characters. Now, there's a different ending depending on just how many survivors there are in your party by the time you finish the game and beat Lady Mamiya. Because this is an RPG, you have many enemies that you'll have to fight, such as giants, ghouls, evil dolls, and skulls. It was nice to see some variety here, and at least they had a theme. but it was a clear deviation from the movie it was supposed to be based on. This was the groundwork for Resident Evil, but there's a significant number in the community that doesn't realize just how important Sweet Home was. In fact, the very early stages of development for Resident Evil was going to be a remake of the classic Famicom game. Fujiwara, the director for the original, was moved to the producer role where director went to Shinji Mikami. Speaking of Mikami, his resume was less than impressive with only one game out of 4 to be very positively reviewed. He worked on a quiz game that never came out in the States, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Goof Troop, and Disney's Aladdin. This was a major opportunity in his first gig as a director for a game. The first big issue is they lost the rights to the Sweet Home license, so they were going to have to pivot to making a game something more original. Thankfully, they were able to keep a few of those elements though. The first being a limited inventory with items littered throughout the map. Of course, said map was a mansion, just like Sweet Home. Weirdly, things like the lighter and the lockpicking ability managed to make its way to Resident Evil, giving us one of the worst voice lines.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Thankfully, one of the things they managed to get rid of, although it was something new and fresh for when it first came out, is the permadeath feature. That would have made Resident Evil far too frustrating, I'm sure. Now, the biggest frustration for a lot of people is that this game never came over to the United States. But in a way, it kind of did. We always have the emulated versions of the original game in all its glory, but there's another way also. Thankfully, fans have gone through and made a translation of that game so you can play it and understand it. If you can't read Japanese like me, I can't even pronounce names. If you ever somehow rented the game like I heard some people did, technically that wasn't a legal or legit copy of this game. I have no idea where you'd be finding that game or when, but that would have been wild for me back when I was playing my NES all the time. I even have a cart of the translated copy because I thought it would be an interesting game to own, and I have it in my collection. I don't think there's actually a more important game to horror history than this one. How many games do we know that was inspired by Resident Evil, which we wouldn't have gotten without Sweet Home to begin with? Sure, I think we would have gotten games like Clock Tower, I think, but survival horror, action horror, and games in general just wouldn't be the same without Sweet Home paving the way for all of it. Were you one of those magical people that somehow discovered this game at a rental place? I would love to hear stories about how you first came across this game. Also, if you managed to beat this game, I would love to know what ending you got because I still can't get the 5-person one. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of suck at this game. Thank you for watching. This was actually a lot of fun to talk about this game again, and even better to remake a video that I am not very proud of. Frankly, I think this needed to happen. I really have a hard time what I was thinking with any of those edits and stuff back then. It is what it is, I guess. Anyways, I'm Adam the Horror Historian. Thank you so much for watching. And next time, we'll actually be starting the very first video for Season 2 of Worst of the Worst. We'll see you then.